Hello again, Netrunner fans. Willingdon here, and I'm excited to bring you a 2014 retrospective in which I'm going to talk a little bit about the changes to the game and the different trends throughout the course of the year, and also give you my picks for the top 10 cards of each side. Before we get into the meat of the video, I'd like to go over exactly what was released throughout the course of the year. We have 9 total data packs, as well as 1 deluxe big box expansion. That's basically the last half of the spin cycle, so true colors forward, and all of the lunar cycle. So I'm using data packs true colors through the source, and we're also going to be talking about Honor and Profit, the deluxe expansion that came out this year. All said, 2014 had 10 Netrunner releases, and that comes out to a sum of $164.50 USD, and that's for the suggested retail price. In other words, about $13.71 a month if you bought one copy of every product released this year. 2014 was certainly a big year for the corporation, and I would say the biggest overall observation I can make is that at the beginning of the year, Runner was clearly the stronger side of the game. And throughout the course of the year, we've seen a shift where now I believe the corporation is the stronger side of the game. I think this is due to a large number of factors, and throughout the course of this video, I'm going to explain some of the reasons why I think the Corp has improved so drastically throughout the year. We're going to start with my first major trend of the year, which is the Corp has gotten a lot more choices and options when it came to the two most important card types, Ice and Agendas. As I was researching this video, I went back and looked at some of the decks that I was working on at the beginning of the year and compared them to similar decks, or at least similar factions and IDs, as the decks I'm working on today. One big thing I noticed was that at the beginning of the year, we didn't really have a lot of options when it came to cheap end-of-the-run ice. A lot of the decks that I was playing were playing Wall of Static, or I had a few of them that were splashing Ice Wall, just to have another stop ice. Throughout the course of the year, we've seen a lot of end-the-run option releases. I'll just go through a few of them. Wraparound, Hive, Next Silver, Lotus Field, Quandary, Guard, the list goes on, Himitsu Bako. There have been a lot of really decent, cheap ice that stop the runner, and these have given us a lot more options. So we're not necessarily playing more of the end-of-the-run ice, we're just not spending as much as our influence on those ice, and we're getting a better return on including those in our deck to begin with. Similarly, 2014 has seen a lot of really high-quality taxing and just big high-end ice released. At the beginning of the year, we were really just using Toll Booth and maybe like Eli to tax the runner and have some monstrous thing that they would have trouble getting through. Now we've got all kinds of options, especially within Jinteki, of ice that is really expensive to break and has some good effect if it's unbroken. Speaking of Jinteki, my second major trend for the year is that Jinteki has become a very real and legitimate faction. In 2013, I think it's fair to say and kind of obvious to say that Jinteki was the weakest faction in the game. There were a lot of people trying to do some interesting things with it, but it just didn't have the card support it needed to really do any strategy. We didn't have enough damage effects to do the flatline decks. We didn't have good enough economy to do more of a Glacier-style taxing deck. And all in all, Jinteki just didn't have a lot of appeal compared to the other three. This year we saw the release of Honor and Profit, which was clearly a lot of good cards for Jinteki, and we'll talk about that more throughout the course of the video, but also a lot of the data packs themselves contained really important Jinteki cards, and we'll see a few of those on the top 10 list. Before we get into number 10, I would like to give one honorable mention to my list, and that is Shell Corporation from All That Remains. I've had a chance to play with this card a fair amount now, and I really do think this card is for real as an economy option for the corporation. It's essentially Katie Jones for the Corp, but it has the added benefit of you can have multiple of them rezzed. It's also a lot easier to recur and get out of your archives than it is on the runner side. It's a lot harder to get Katie Jones back. And I think that Shell Corporation, we've only seen the very beginnings of using this card. I think that this card shines the most in a Glacier style deck that can just defend or make exceedingly expensive the server that you're going to put it in. I've seen a lot of people playing this card in a trap-oriented deck where you put a advanced Junebug or maybe a snare or something like that down, and then you defend your Shell Corporation with the nasty thing. I think that's a decent idea as well, but I really do think that the better thing to do with Shell Corporation is to use it in a Glacier deck that plays really monstrous and really mean ice, and that's where I've been having success with this card. Getting into the list, we're going to start with number 10, and that is Blue Sun Powering the Future from Up and Over. I include this card on the list mainly because of the popularity it's had since its release, and the fact that the deck surrounding this card has been proven in a fair number of tournaments. The basic idea with Blue Sun is that you're going to somehow cheat the cost of a giant piece of ice, and then you can later return that giant piece of ice to get a bunch of credits. Now, there's a lot more that you can do with the deck, and there's a lot more credit management things that you can do kind of on a smaller scale, but the basic gimmick is the one I just described with this deck. This card, I think, is not going to survive a whole lot into 2015, and the main reason I think that is because we have the Order and Chaos release coming out very, very soon towards the end of this month, and that's going to be a huge lot of new Wayland options. Half the box is going to be Wayland. So I would anticipate that some of the new IDs or some of the new ice and various cards that are in the box will make us not as excited about Blue Sun, but it's definitely fair to say that there's been a lot of buzz and a lot of success with Blue Sun, especially towards the end of this year since the release of the card. Moving on to number 9, we have Near Earth Hub from Upstock. Again, I include this card mainly because of the popularity of the card. Pretty much everybody who is playing an NBN deck based on Fast Advance immediately switched to Near Earth Hub upon release. Now, my opinion on Near Earth Hub is that it's not really that good with the Fast Advance deck. It's just better than the other two IDs. The other two IDs really don't do anything for you. The Near Earth Hub ability lets you draw a few cards throughout the course of the game, and it gives you 2 extra influence. So the fact that this ID is not as useless as the other two IDs, I think has been the main force behind this ID's success throughout the year. Now, I do think that the most popular Near Earth Hub decks don't really capitalize on the ID in the way that they could. They're probably not playing a new remote down every single turn. It's going to be a fair number of turns, but they're not going to be able to consistently create a remote all the time and draw a lot of cards. Like I said, they're probably only going to get 3 to 5 cards throughout the course of the game. Now, that's better than the other two IDs. So I think really Near Earth Hub is the type of thing where until we get more NBN IDs, it's going to be the choice for NBN just because it's not as terrible as the other two IDs. I have seen a lot of people moving towards making news now where they're actually able to utilize those credits, but I think if you're not doing something very Tracy and sort of gimmicky, Near Earth Hub is your choice. The 2 extra influence is really, really strong, and the fact that the ability is very all-purpose, you're going to almost certainly draw a few cards with it, means that it's probably going to be your choice for most NBN decks for the foreseeable future. My number 8 pick for 2014 is Architect from Up and Over. This is a piece of ice that was designed by the first world champion back in 2012. His name is Jeremy Zorn, and this is really the future and sort of a precedent setter for ice. I think that this shows us what's possible with economy ice, and I hope that we see more things like this in the future. I can't really impress upon you how useful Architect is. If you haven't fired off its subroutines, I highly recommend trying to play it in a deck, because this thing just does so much cool stuff. The second subroutine is absolutely insane with like economy assets, with things that trash and come back, with cards that have been destroyed, like Jackson Howard that gets trashed. All around, this card saves you money with installing ice. It saves you money with getting cards back. It lets you reuse money cards. Architect is really incredible, and the tacked on, it sort of feels tacked on, can't be in trash while installed is really, really good. I like this card. I think this is a really good use of 2 influence, but I also like the design in that, you know, this thing still just gets crushed by Mimic. If you just play a Mimic down, you just run over their Architect. So this is a really good piece of ice, but it has really simple and obvious solutions. My number 7 pick for 2014 is House of Knives from Honor and Profit. I've talked in some of my other data pack reviews about how I think 3-for-1s are a pretty underutilized area of the game, and how I'd like to see more 3-for-1s with really game-changing and powerful abilities. I think House of Knives is an absolute precedent setter when it comes to this kind of thing. I really think that House of Knives is the bar at which I compare most other 3-for-1s. This just fits so well into what especially the PE style of Jinteki was trying to do. It gives you extra damage effects. It makes the runs more dangerous. It just all around gives you a ton of value for that 3-for-1 body, and it counts as some of your 20 agenda points. All around, I love this card, and I think that this is the most powerful 3-for-1 we had seen in the game upon its release. I really think only Gilahan's Arcology even got close to challenging this card, and I think House of Knives will continue to be a sort of standard for 3-for-1s in the future. This just fits so well with the net damage oriented Jinteki strategies, and I think is a big reason why we've seen a lot of interest in personal evolution throughout the year. My number 6 pick for 2014 is Caprice Nisei from Double Time. Caprice is such a pain in the butt if she's rezzed behind some ice. I think if you've ever experienced Caprice in that situation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you fail a side game against her, it can be so expensive to get into that server later. You can potentially fail again. Caprice is a really frustrating card to deal with as the runner, and in my opinion, is one of the absolute best reasons to try to get into R&D and access some cards early in the game, because if you can trash her out of R&D, your problem in the future is going to be easily solved. I think in terms of the metagame, Caprice has been a big reason why we've seen Glacier-style Jinteki, especially Replicating Perfection, do so well. She is comparable to Ash, but is in faction, so you're not spending influence, and she has a really powerful ability to protect both a scoring server or a central server like R&D. Now, I think she actually has an advantage over Ash as well, because Ash relies on you having about credit parity with the runner, whereas as long as you have 2 credits with Caprice, you're going to be able to play the side game. So I think that Caprice is really a game changer for the Glacier-style decks. It's made it a lot easier to score 4-for-2s and 5-for-3s, and I would really welcome more defensive upgrades like Caprice in the future. My number 5 pick for 2014 is Mushin Notion. Mushin has been a huge game changer for Jinteki personal evolution, and I think has been a big force in the renewed interest of that faction throughout the year. I think we've seen periods throughout the year where people got interested in PE and it started showing up at a lot of tournaments, especially following the Cambridge Regionals, where Mushin Notion based PE deck did very well. PE is a very scary deck to play against, and Mushin Notion is the type of card that really ramps up the power level of the scary cards that deck can play. Now, the thing that I think is most important about Mushin Notion in PE is that it gives you a way to be proactive and to actually develop the board, something that PE has a lot of issue doing. It's really hard to get further ahead when you are ahead, and it's really hard to come back when you're behind with PE. Mushin Notion gives you a way that you can do that because it really ramps up the power level of whatever you're using with it. It's also kind of nice as an economy card. PE's had a lot of issues with economy. I think Jinteki generally has had a lot of issues with economy, and Mushin Notion is a pseudo economy card in that it places advancement tokens that you don't have to spend. I think Mushin is here to stay, and I think people are going to be trying to use it in PE for the foreseeable future. I've talked about my reservations with playing the card in PE and why I don't like playing it in my version of the deck, but I think that the card is extremely powerful and extremely good, and I only expect to be able to do more good things with it in the future. My number 4 pick is something of a cop-out. I'm going to put 2 pieces of ice tied at number 4. These are Koma Inu from Honor and Profit and Tsurugi from True Colors. The reason I put both of these ice together as number 4 is because they share one thing in common while being generally pretty different pieces of ice otherwise. The thing they share is that it's really difficult to face check ice against a Jinteki deck, knowing that these 2 ice are an option. Koma Inu fits really well into the PE style decks, where hitting them for a bunch of cards is really strong, whereas I think Tsurugi is a lot better in the taxing style deck, because you're not as worried about getting them for the cards, and you more would like to have a piece of ice that's really expensive to deal with a static 4 subroutines. So both of these pieces of ice, I think, have really changed the game for Jinteki. They've given us a nice mid-range option for our ice in a variety of decks, and I think both of them are very compelling reasons to try to build Jinteki decks based around either damage or using damage as defense. I think these 2 ice are some of the best taxing ice in the game, and I think that they really define the Jinteki style of ice, where the damage is sort of a taxation effect and it is the punishing effect that Jinteki uses. So I really, really like the design of these 2 ice, and I would like to see more taxing style ice for the other factions that utilize sort of the feel of the faction itself. Moving on to number 3, we have Sweeps Week from True Colors. This is probably the best burst economy card in the game, at least on the corporation side, and I think is the biggest reason why we've seen Fast Advance continue to be so strong from 2013 into 2014. A lot of people say that the same exact Fast Advance deck that we saw a lot of in 2013 is the one that is Near Earth Hub today with some very minor changes. But I think people really gloss over the amount of new tools that Fast Advance has gotten throughout the course of the year, and I think Sweeps Week is just an unbelievable tool for that style of a deck. It's essentially a hedge fund in a huge number of situations, but it only costs 1 to play, and the fact that it has an added utility against the most popular runner of all time, Andromeda, the fact that it can get you the plus 8 credits on the first turn against her is absolutely insane. I think Sweeps Week is the biggest reason why Fast Advance has continued to be really powerful, and we've seen people being willing to play Sweeps Week in decks that aren't NBN just because of how effective it is as an economy option. So I think Sweeps Week is here to stay and is going to be in almost every NBN deck that you will attempt to build for the conceivable future. Well, we're starting to get to the top of the list, and number 2 is the Future Perfect. This agenda, I think, really changed the way I think about 5 for 3 agendas. Really, prior to Future Perfect, I'd say Priority Requisition was the only 5 for 3 that competitive players were heavily considering. There might have been some fringe cases where other 5 for 3s were playable, but generally speaking, 5 for 3s are bad because they're really hard to score, and it's a lot easier to do a 2 and 1 point scoring scheme than it is to do a 3 point oriented or a 3 point involved scoring scheme. The Future Perfect's really a big game changer for that. The fact that it's not only worth the 3 points, but it's really, really hard to steal out of the central servers is absolutely critical for this card. It's such a frustrating card to access on HQ or R&D as the runner. It's even reasonably safe in archives. If you get this card behind 1 or 2 pieces of ice, it can be really expensive and really hard to access as the runner. And conversely, it feels really awesome to score it as the runner because it's such a pain in the butt. I think that the side game aspect has frustrated a lot of people with this card, but honestly, I really like the side game on this. I think that if it was a purely random system, like we just did a die roll or something like that, it wouldn't be as interesting. But the fact that it's a pseudo-random system where the credits that each player has actually have an impact, and there's a sort of a psychological aspect to it, it's more than just rock, paper, scissors. I think that the Future Perfect is a really well-designed and interesting card. I like that it has a weakness on remote servers so that it isn't difficult to steal when it's advanced in a server. I just all around like the design of this, and I think that it's really made the Glacier style Jinteki, the RP Jinteki, really strong. I think this is probably the biggest card that the Glacier style Jinteki decks have gotten, period. And I think that this is really a precedent setter in terms of what can be done with the power level of 5 for 3s. I would like to see more 5 for 3 agendas that are as good as this one, and I have a feeling that we're probably going to see them given the fragments and the various other things that we've been seeing in recent sets. Finally, we come to my number 1 pick, best corporation card of 2014. I'm guessing that you can probably predict this one if you've followed the competitive scene throughout the year. My pick is NAPD Contract from Double Time. If you had to pick one reason why the corporation has overtaken the runner, which I don't necessarily think is fair, but let's just pretend that you have to do that, I would pick NAPD Contract just because it fits in so many decks, and the drawback on it, the bad pub thing, is basically irrelevant in a huge number of decks. The fact that if you have one bad pub, you can still play it down, advance, and then score it the next turn, makes the drawback so minuscule. So even if you do happen to get bad pub, you can still score it in 2 turns. You're going to have 2 bad pub for it to actually take 3 turns to score. And the other thing to say with this is that it always costs the runner 4. So if they get it if they get it installed, for example, they're paying 4. Out of the central, they're paying 4. It's always 4, and that's really, really expensive and can be really devastating, especially early in the game. I can't think of another agenda in the entire game where early in the game, the runner steals it, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, they're broke now. That's okay. You know, losing an NAPD can actually be a good thing for you as the Corp in some circumstances. Man, is this card good. It's neutral, so basically whenever you're trying to put a deck together and you need some 2-point agendas, you better consider 6 of those points as NAPD Contract, because this card is unbelievable. Now, in the future, I think it's possible that we'll see NAPD taper off a bit, especially if runners giving the corporation bad pub becomes more of a real thing in competitive play. Right now, it's extremely difficult to give the runner or to give the corporation bad pub as the runner. So I don't really see NAPD contract going away immediately, but with this big box right around the corner, a bunch of new Anarch stuff, I would anticipate seeing some more bad pub options in that box. So NAPD contracts, my pick as the best card for 2014. Pretty undisputedly one of the best agendas in the game. Man, NAPD contracts good. My pick for 2014's best card. Well, as we can see from this list, very Jinteki heavy. Lots and lots of Jinteki stuff on this list. But all around, I think a good mix for most of the factions here. We're seeing a little bit of something for everyone in this year's release. And I think this is a good year to be a corporation player. Lots of good stuff going on for us, getting lots of new options. I'd like to quickly go through the pack breakdown of my list. So I'll put this on the screen here. We have 4 Honor and Profit cards. We're in the top 10 list. Not a big surprise given what I was just saying about Jinteki. 2 cards from Double Time, 2 from True Colors, 2 from Up and Over, and then 1 from Upstock. And my honorable mention was Shell Corporation, so that was from All That Remains. So hopefully this will give you an idea of which packs, if you missed a few, which ones you should go back and get. And I think that you're not going to be disappointed buying any of the packs I listed here because of their huge impact on the game. So that's going to do it for the Corp portion of my top 10 list, but I have another top 10 list coming in my next video that's going to be for the runner cards, and at the end of that video I'm going to do my pick for the best pack of the year as well. So make sure you tune into the next part of this video, and if you liked it, press that subscribe and the button that looks like a thumbs up, and I'll see you over in the next video.